Well, the same way as he lied when he said nobody was with him when he shot the bird. Black George, the gamekeeper, was there. Tom confessed it to me.
Is this true, child? Asked Mr. Allworthy. Why did you lie to me about it? Tom explained that it was a question of honour. He had promised the gamekeeper to keep quiet.
It was my idea to follow the bird, sir, he said. Please, sir, let me be punished. Take my little horse away. But please, sir, forgive poor George.
Mr. Allworthy was quiet for some time. Then he told the boys to go away and to be more friendly with each other. Towards the gamekeeper he was more severe. He called him to the house, paid him his wages, and dismissed him. The education of Tom and Master Blifil was in the hands of two men, Mr. Thwackum and Mr. Square, who lived in the house as part of the family. Mr. Thwackum knew a lot about religion and morality, while Mr. Square had studied philosophy and believed in reason more than in religion. Mrs. Blifil, now many years widowed, liked them both. She enjoyed the conversation of Mr. Thwackum and admired the good looks of Mr. Square. Both men had their eye on the possibility of marrying her, and so they hated each other. But there was one point on which they agreed. In order to please the widow, they both took every opportunity to show her that they preferred her son. Poor Tom, therefore, suffered many more beatings than young Master Blifil. The good Mr. Allworthy called Tom his own boy, and in all things made him equal with Master Blifil. Mrs. Blifil agreed with this, though everyone believed she secretly hated Tom. When he was young, this may have been so. However, as he grew up and began to learn how to be charming to ladies, she grew fonder of him. By the time he was 18 years old, the whole country was talking of Mrs. Blifil's liking for Tom, which made his two teachers hate him even more. Tom worried greatly about Black George Seagrim and his unfortunate family, and tried to help them. First, he sold his little horse to give them money for food. Then he sold a fine Bible which Mr. Allworthy had given him. He was punished for this with more beatings. At the same time, Tom began to grow friendly with the neighbour whose dead bird had caused so much trouble, and so he met his neighbour's daughter. But as this young lady is to be the heroine of our story, and probably we will all fall in love with her, it is not right to introduce her at the end of a chapter. Chapter 4. Tom Falls in Love. Bring on flowers, soft winds, and sweet birdsong to welcome the lovely Sophia Weston. To imagine her appearance, you must think of famous beauties in art and history, and of the woman who is dearest to your own heart. Sophia was the only daughter of Mr. Weston. She was now 17. Her hair was rich and black, her shape delicate, her eyes bright, her nose regular, her teeth white, her lips red, and her neck long and lovely. Such was the outside of Sophia, and inside she was equally fine. Her mind was as charming as her appearance, and her sweet temper lit up her face when she smiled. Sophia had been educated under the care of an aunt, who was a lady of the world. In her manner and conversation, Sophia was a perfect lady. Perhaps she needed a little of the style that comes from life in the highest circles, but style can never replace true innocence and good sense. Her father was fonder of Sophia than of any other human being, but he allowed his sister to take her away for 3 years for the sake of her education. Now she had returned, to rule her father's house and to sit at the top of his table, where Tom often dined. Mr. Weston had a great love of hunting, and Tom became a favourite companion in this sport. Mr. Weston often wished he had a son like Tom, and let him freely use everything that was most precious to him, his guns, his dogs, and his horses. Tom wanted to ask Mr. Weston if he would employ Black George. He decided to ask Sophia to help him. Now, if Sophia had some influence on her father, who loved her above all things, after those things already mentioned, which he needed for his sport, then Tom had some influence on Sophia. Tom was now approaching the age of 20. He was open-hearted, good-natured, and had a natural way with ladies. The women of the neighbourhood thought he was a handsome fellow, and so did Sophia. Tom was also a great favourite of Mr. Weston, who was so busy with his dogs and his horses that he gave Tom every opportunity to be with his daughter that a lover could wish for. In Tom's company, the innocent Sophia was at her brightest. Tom did not notice this, and it is not surprising, since Sophia did not notice it herself. Indeed, her heart was lost before she suspected it was in danger. One afternoon, finding Sophia alone, Tom said he had something to ask her. Nature whispered something in Sophia's ear, and the colour left her cheeks. Tom did not notice, and he told her about the gamekeeper, whose unfortunate family was now nearly starving. Would Sophia ask her father to employ Black George? "I will do it with all my heart," said Sophia, with a smile full of sweetness. "I really pity the poor fellow, and just yesterday I sent his wife some money and a dress. And now, Mr. Jones, I have something to ask you." "Anything, madam," said Tom, taking Sophia's hand and kissing it. This was the first time his lips had ever touched her, and the blood which before had left her cheeks now rushed back to colour all her face and neck. When she could speak, which was not instantly, Sophia asked Tom not to lead her father through so many dangers when hunting. She was frightened every time they went out together, knowing that Mr. Weston would follow Tom anywhere. Tom promised not to ride so madly, and left, happy with his success. That evening, after dinner, Sophia played music for her father. She played all his favourite tunes 3 times over, and this so pleased the good man that he got up from his chair to give her a kiss. Sophia took this opportunity to keep her promise to Tom. She did it so well that next morning the gamekeeper was called and given a job. Tom's success in this affair was soon widely known. Some said it was an act of good nature. Blifil, who hated Black George, said it was an insult to Mr. Allworthy. Thwackum and Square agreed because they were now very jealous of Tom and the widow. But Mr. Allworthy approved. He said he wished he could see more examples of such good and loyal friendship. Fortune had other ideas, however, and soon Mr. Allworthy saw Tom's actions in a different light. Now, though Tom greatly liked Sophia, appreciating her beauty and admiring all her other qualities, she had made no deep impression on his heart. The truth is, it belonged to another woman. This was not Mrs. Blifil, though she was clearly fond of Tom. No, it was a younger woman. The reader will remember that we have often mentioned the family of the gamekeeper George Seagrim, or Black George, as he was usually called. This family consisted of a wife and 5 children. The second child was a daughter whose name was Molly. She was considered one of the best-looking girls in the whole country. When she was 16, Tom, who was 3 years older, began to notice Molly's beauty. Though he was strongly attracted to her, he believed it was wrong to make love to a girl, even a poor girl, and so he stayed away from her house for 3 whole months. But when Molly saw that Tom was backward, she became more forward, and found a way to meet him and tempt him to do what they both wanted. Tom desired Molly, and Molly gave herself to Tom. Tom was grateful to Molly and wanted to be kind to her. This was the situation. Poor as she was, Tom could not think of abandoning Molly, and so he did not think of loving Sophia. It was Molly's mother who first noticed the change in her shape. To hide the signs of the baby Molly was expecting, she gave her the dress which Sophia had sent her. Molly, who usually wore rags, was very pleased with the fine dress and wore it to church. "Who is she?" was the question that ran around the church when the fine lady arrived. But when the answer came, "It's Molly Seagrim," the jealous women laughed at her. Sophia happened to be present at this time. She was very pleased with the beauty of the girl and sorry that people laughed at her. When she returned home, she called for the gamekeeper and offered to give Molly a job. Poor Seagrim was silent because he knew about Molly's condition. Back at the church, an angry scene had developed. As people left, they laughed and pointed at Molly's fine dress, and some began to throw dirt and rubbish. Molly turned to face the crowd, and soon a fight broke out among the gravestones. Men and women, but mostly women, bit and scratched and hit and tore at Molly's hair. Clothes were torn too, until many were nearly naked. Molly fought back furiously with all her strength. At this point Tom came riding past with Square and Master Blifil. Seeing his Molly under attack, Tom jumped off his horse and went among the crowd with a horsewhip, turning them away. He then pulled off his coat and buttoned it around Molly, wiped the blood from her face with his handkerchief, and took her home on his horse. He gave her a kiss, said he would return in the evening, and rode away. Chapter 5. A Sleepless Night for Sophia. The next morning Tom went hunting with Mr. Weston, and afterwards was invited to dinner. The lovely Sophia was brighter than usual that day, and if she wanted Tom to notice her, she certainly succeeded. Another dinner guest was Mr. Supple, the priest from the village church. He was a good-natured man who was always silent at table, though his mouth was never shut. In other words, he had one of the best appetites in the world. After dinner, though, he loved to talk, and he had some news. "I believe, lady, you saw a young woman at church yesterday, wearing one of your own dresses. After you left, this dress caused a terrible battle. This morning the young woman in question was called to explain the matter to Mr. Allworthy. When she appeared, everyone could see that she will soon give birth to a bastard. As she refused to name the father, she will be sent to prison."
"Is that your news?" cried Weston. "Nothing more important? Come, Tommy, drink up and pass the bottle."
Tom made a polite excuse and quickly left the table.
"Ah,"
said Weston, after he had gone.
I see. Tom is certainly the father of this bastard."
"I should be very sorry if that is true," said Supple.
"Why sorry?" cried Weston. "Haven't you been the father of any bastards yourself? You must have been lucky, then."
"I am sure you joke, Mr. Weston," replied the priest, "and I hope you are wrong about the young gentleman. He is a little wild, perhaps, but a good young man. I would not like to see him lose the good opinion of Mr. Allworthy."
No, said Weston. "He will lose nobody's good opinion, and the women will like him better. Ask my daughter here. You have no worse opinion of a young man for giving a girl a bastard, have you, Sophie?"
It was a cruel question to ask poor Sophia. She had seen Tom's colour change when he heard the news, and she thought her father's suspicions were correct. Her heart at once told her the great secret it had been hiding. Shocked and confused, she excused herself and went to her room. Tom hurried home and found Molly was still there. He asked for a private conversation with Mr. Allworthy, and said he was the guilty father. He begged Mr. Allworthy to let Molly return to her family. After hesitating for some time, Mr. Allworthy agreed. He then spoke for a long time about right and wrong. Tom listened gratefully and promised to improve. Mr. Allworthy was certainly angry with Tom, but he was also pleased with his honour and honesty, so Thwackum could not persuade him to punish the young man. Square was more clever. He reminded Mr. Allworthy of all the things Tom had done for the gamekeeper and his family.
Now we can see, sir, that these things were not done out of friendship, but to get Molly for his wicked ways. For the first time, the good Mr. Allworthy began to have a bad impression of Tom. That night, Sophia slept very little. She was already dressed when her maid, Mrs. Honour, came to wake her. "Oh, madam," said Mrs. Honour, "what do you think?" And with these words she began to tell Sophia all the gossip from the village about Tom and Molly. What passed through poor Sophia's mind? The reader will remember that only yesterday the news of Molly had opened Sophia's eyes to her heart's love. Now she decided she felt nothing for Tom. But love is a disease, and the very next time she saw him, all her former feelings returned. From that time her heart kept changing from hot to cold to hot again, until Sophia was desperate for a cure. She decided to avoid Tom, and made plans to visit her aunt, but fortune stopped the plan with an accident. Every day Mr. Weston grew fonder of his daughter, almost more than his precious dogs. Since he could not bring himself to abandon the dogs, he managed cleverly to enjoy both dogs and daughter by taking Sophia hunting with him. Sophia disliked the sport, which was too rough for her, but she always obeyed her father. She decided not to visit her aunt until the end of the hunting season. The second time she went hunting, her horse started to behave badly. Tom was nearby, and saw that she was in danger. He quickly rode up, jumped off his horse, and was in time to catch Sophia as her horse threw her and ran off. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked her. When she said she was unhurt, he said, "Then heaven be praised. If I have broken my arm, it is nothing after the danger you were in." "Broken your arm?" screamed Sophia. "I am afraid I have, madam," said Tom, "but I still have a good arm to help you home." Mr. Weston then came back with the other riders and Sophia's horse. Finding his daughter unhurt, he was delighted, and everyone returned to the house, where a doctor was called to look at Tom's arm. This brave act of Tom's made a deep impression on Sophia's heart, and she no longer wanted to visit her aunt. Chapter 6. Tom learns a little about women. After his accident, Tom stayed at Mr. Weston's house. He had many visitors. Mr. Allworthy came every day, and took the opportunity to give Tom good advice. Thwackum also came and said that heaven was punishing Tom for his bad ways. Square said the opposite, that even a wise man can break an arm. Blifil sometimes came too, but Mr. Weston was never out of the sick-room, except when he was busy with his horses or his bottle. He told Tom loudly that beer was the best medicine, but the doctor disagreed. When Tom could sit up, Mr. Weston brought Sophia to see him. Soon they were free to spend hours together, talking and playing music. Sophia's lips said nothing about her feelings, but her eyes said everything. One day Mr. Weston said to Tom,
"I love you dearly, my boy, and will do anything in my power for you. Tomorrow morning, take your choice of all of my horses. Why not take the young horse that Sophie rode? She cost me £50.
"If she cost £1,000, cried Tom, "I would give that horse to the dogs."
"What?" answered Weston. "Because she broke your arm? She's just an animal. Be a man, Tom. Forgive and forget."
Sophia's face changed as she listened. She believed she knew why Tom hated the horse. Tom noticed her colour, and at last he began to suspect the reason. His heart told him clearly that he loved Sophia, and that she loved him. Sweet and delicious feelings now filled Tom's heart, but they were mixed with bitter thoughts. He knew that Sophia's father had a violent affection for his daughter and wanted the best marriage for her.